to give us a shout out. This project has been made possible in part by a grant from the Rhode Island Humanities Council, an independent affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities. The Rhode Island Council for the Humanities feeds, supports, and strengthens public history, cultural heritage, civic engagement, and community engagement of all Rhode Islanders. This project has also been made possible in part by a grant from the Pontiac Education Foundation. What is each of us, okay, these are getting into all I need to read, right? To acknowledge everyone? Okay. So again, my name is Barbara Morse. You spoke about this coming to light. I think for myself and our panelists, this has been in the spotlight for as long as we've been alive and dates back to 400 years, basically. I would like to go through and introduce each of our panelists. We'll start with Coby, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and your involvement.
First of all, thanks for having me. It's the first time up here in Pontiac at the high school, so it's a pleasure. My name is Coby Dennis. I'm the Director of Diversity, Culture, and Inclusion at the YMCA Greater Providence. I'm also in charge of facilities there, so I wear many hats. I'm a community leader and have been doing that for many years. Proud husband and dad, and just here for a great dialogue with leaders that I respect and that fought alongside for many years. So I'm just happy to be here.
Anastasia?
Good morning, everyone. It is an honor for me to be here with you today. I'm going to bring a whole lot of sassiness to me being real, but my name is Anastasia Williams. I am State Representative of District Number 9 in the City of Providence. This, too, is my first time being here, and I am excited. I can't wait to go into that library downstairs and even interact with some of you all, if not all of you all, right now. And I want to give a big shout out to Emily Richards. She is a top player, not us. Trust me. This needs to be patented and given to the governor, and this is definitely better than cooler and warmer, baby. I'm gonna tell you. So, Emily, thank you very much. I appreciate your work, and as much as I don't know you, folks are going to, moving forward. This is definitely an excellent display of unity. I thank you for that. I am started out as an organizer in the community just by virtue of my foundation and my family, being a military brat, and I'm still a brat, but nevertheless, my foundation was so solid as far as helping and giving back to others, and my story is being here with you and doing what we need to do. Thank you.
Kasim.
Good morning. Kasim Yarn here. I'm the Director of Veteran Services for the state of Rhode Island, the first of its kind in the state through the work of Governor Gina Raimondo, appointing the first Director of Veteran Services for the state. I grew up in Mississippi. Probably one of the, if you hear through Dr. King's various speeches, he talked about Mississippi a lot in not a good light. I joined the Navy when I was 17. I recently retired 4 years ago, and I've been blessed by I get to give back to a state that's given me much. And thank you for allowing me to be here today.
Jim.
Well, first and foremost, thank everyone for being here. This is a very important discussion, so I give credit to the organizers here at Pontiac High School. I thank my fellow panelists for being here, taking time out of their busy schedules. I am the president of the NAACP Providence branch. I've been a member of the branch for 17 years. Before that, I was a board member of the Urban League for 9. I've been involved in civil rights for the past 45 years, 30 in Rhode Island. I started really my career 45 years ago at the Boston Redevelopment Authority, an agency that knocked down my block when I was in high school through urban renewal and eminent domain. So that kind of set my path to do social justice and economic development. So 8 years later, I worked for that same Boston Redevelopment Authority to make sure that things in Boston would not be as bad as they were. So that kind of set me off in terms of a path of social justice. So I've been volunteering in civil rights for the last 45 years. as a volunteer. And I thank you for inviting me.
Jim, thank you. Panelists, I want to thank all the students here. Thank you for learning now. And medical reporter, that's very important to me. Okay. Well, we have a lot of really good questions from the students here. We're going to start with this one. What is each of us, and this is from a student, personally willing to do to make a difference? And maybe we can start with Anastasia. We're going to beauty first.
Thank you. Because you know, if it was 8, you'd have to go to the gym, right?
Yeah, for sure.
No, what is each of us personally willing to do to make a difference? It's a question, right? Realistically, it's entirely up to each and every one of us to make that decision. Where are you today? What would you like to see? How would you fit in that particular situation or environment? Is it good, bad? Does it lack something that you know you could bring to the table? So for me, how would you make a difference? President Barack Obama used to say, be the change that you want to see. If you see it, if you think it, if you believe it, you can do it. So for me, that's how I think each and every one of us can make a difference.
Coby.
Sure. Thank you, Rev. Williams. Yeah, I think personally, taking on a job, a lot of people of color say all the time, it's not my job to teach whites or non-blacks how non-people of color, you know, what to say, what to do. Well, I don't believe in that. I think it is my job to stand out and be at the forefront of these conversations all the time, like being here. If I didn't think this was my job, I'd be sitting home or at work saying, you know, that's not my job, leave it to somebody else. I'm willing to be at the forefront, talk about these situations, make folks uncomfortable, squirm whether you're behind a mask or not, and like I said, be intentional about the conversations we're having. Here at the high school level, it should be at the middle school level, it should be starting in preschool if we can, but that's what I'm willing to do for sure, and I'm going to keep doing it too, so I can't anymore.
Part of it's about education, knowing what's going on and being willing to do something about it. Kasim?
I think leadership starts at home. Me, with my ability to look myself in the mirror, understand what my weaknesses and what my strengths are. But more importantly, set the example. I can't ask someone to carry the weight or the burden if I'm not willing to be out in the community like I'm surrounded by such as great leaders. And it takes work. You cannot go through life with your head buried in the sand that's going on around you. But what better place to start that, to facilitate discussion, than in an institution of learning? We write the narrative. We don't know what's going to as soon as we turn the page. That's just an empty book. It's up to us to fill that book with information and to lay a foundation for future generations. Thank you.
And Jim, being willing to make a difference is being up on what's going on in our community.
Well, as the son of immigrants that grew up in the poorest neighborhood in Boston, I feel that I'm very privileged and very fortunate to be doing the kinds of things I can do. So that's why I've decided to dedicate my life in terms of social justice and civil rights. I'm still working a 40-hour job. And NAACP, the oldest and largest civil rights organization in America, is a demanding volunteer position as president. But I'm willing to put in 20 to 30 hours of volunteer work each and every week, each and every year, each and every decade to make things right, because it is just that important. So I've dedicated my life to this because I feel that we have to lead by example. You know, 20 to 30 hours, if I have to do more hours, I do that too, as a volunteer. And to try to organize people, to try to get them, to empower them, you know, so that they can be leaders as well. All of this is very difficult, but because the issues are so grave, you have to make a decision. Are you going to do something, or you're not going to do something, and are you willing to spend that kind of commitment? And I've always tried to make sure that I never disappointed myself in terms of my own commitment to the rights of people of color and social justice.
How do you engage others in what's going on right now? It's easy to say, this doesn't affect me. That's on TV. I'm seeing this on the news. How do you engage folks who don't feel this impacts them when in reality, it impacts every single one of us?
You know, by making it the norm. Like I said, this shouldn't be, like in schools, it shouldn't be an elective. It needs to be part of the curriculum. And when I say that in the broad scope of all discussions. We should be at the table. When I say we, I mean people of color. I'm tired of being the only person of color at these tables. And I still am to this day. I'm still excited when I see a t-shirt like this. I'm still excited when I see a library here that has black pictures in it. It shouldn't be like that, especially in a community so diverse like Rhode Island. So we got to extend the dialogue by making it the norm, making it a normal conversation, making it a cafeteria conversation, making it, you know, a conversation in the schoolyard, so on and so forth. Until we do that, it's going to continue to be, you know, secondary.
And engaging students of all colors, bringing like this t-shirt.
Absolutely.
Bringing students of all colors together to talk about very important issues.
Communication, communication, communication. We come from different places, but we are all one voice. We have different races, different ethnicity, and all that, but we are all from the human race, period. There is only one that we know. I've heard it's mentioned about Martians and all these other entities. I haven't seen one, even though I can identify some of my colleagues as some. But nevertheless, realistically, we are the same, period. But we need to communicate that. When I come into a room and I'm the only flavor up in there, and no disrespect, because I do consider myself seasoning all kinds of good ones. It's definitely uncomfortable in a two-way street. I walk in and I see my environment and I have to acclimate to it. It should not be that way. I should go in and feel as comfortable as everyone that's in there before me. But every single time I walk into an environment that does not include, that is not diverse with regards to person of color, I have to acclimate. I have to scope out who is where, who is who, and make sure that I am ready and prepared for whatever may come. Because I have no idea what's in the mindset of someone in that room against me. So, communication is a great and important factor that is missing in our society these days. And it might just be because of fear. Fear. But if you have faith, you cannot have fear. If you have hope, you cannot have fear. You have to choose one or the other. So as bold as I am, I said, bring it on. I'm in it to win it. And I exert myself in those situations and those environments. But I stay prepared because I never know what's going to jump off. So,
When you talk about fear, it's been proven that there are inherent biases. And maybe, Kasim, you can talk about that and how we can start breaking those down. And maybe it's conversations like this here at Poneganthet.
We live in a world that we're more diverse than ever. Through social media, through technology, we reach across the globe and impact lives. When you look at other countries, you see some of the atrocities that are going on that they're struggling with. And then, but here we are in 2020, and we still have to discuss racism and our own, explicit or implicit biases in a way we all have. But you got to acknowledge it. But you also got to serve with a stronger sense of humility. Because as I've been to Pontiac High School before, and in my remarks I say how no one gets a level of success by themselves. But when you put it through a racist lens, when we are deliberately marginalizing a group of individuals because of color, and those preconceived notions that are built up with that, that's a problem. But, as Brother Dennis said, we can't be the only ones carrying the flag. We need other ethnic groups to also carry that flag. And no bond can break us. Nobody can break that bond if we develop that mentality. But it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of work, not necessarily by us, but all of us, collectively, to ball up that fist and start to move the needle to end this atrocity.
And a lot of this starts, I'm going to go to you, Jim, a lot of this starts with young people. We've seen the Black Lives Movement here in Rhode Island, and we see such a diverse group of people. We need to continue that. Kids are our future. I mean, we always say that. So the important role of these young people in this room in getting involved in these matters.
Yes, I think we have probably the smartest and most sensitive generation in the history of America right now with Gen Z and millennials. So to that extent, we have a lot of opportunity and hope that I think is legitimate. So, but I think it has to go deeper. You know, each of you probably has a black friend somewhere, and they're not being treated probably the same as you are. So to say, well, I'm not a racist, okay, that's great, but you have to be an anti-racist. You have to do affirmative steps to eradicate racism each and every day as far as you can. You have to understand your privilege and understand the power that if you step out and you also say to your friends and family, especially your older family members, that this is wrong, you can educate in ways that we can't, because to a certain extent, they will not listen to us because we're perceived as a certain kind of activist or whatever. But when they start hearing it from their own family, from their own young people, with the sincerity that you will bring in, then that, I think, will start changing hearts and minds. You know, I grew up in Boston at a high school that was 90% white, and I think that at that time, people were really conflicted because of the riots after Martin Luther King was assassinated. They didn't know what to do, and it was a different time when, you know, if you saw a black person on TV, everybody would call everybody to make sure they were tuning in, because there wasn't black people on TV in the 60s, unless it was Sammy Davis Jr. or somebody. So we don't live in that time. You've grown up with a black president even. I never thought I'd see that in my lifetime. So to a certain extent, because diversity is more normalized in your world, there's opportunity that wasn't in my world back in those days. So I think we have an opportunity, because unless we change the hearts and minds of everyone, including white people, it'll never get done, because it'll just stay the same, and we'll have the same discussion 40 years from now. So let's end it here, okay? Let's decide to be anti-racist. It's not good enough, it's not bad to say I'm not a racist. Certainly I'm never going to say that that's bad. But what are you doing to be anti-racist? What are you doing to fight anti-blackness, which exists today as much as it ever has existed? You know, this country was built on slavery and bondage and having one group thinking they're better than the other group. And that hasn't changed by any stretches of imagination. By every metric, there's disparities that are gaping, you know, in this country and in this state and in this city of Providence, the capital city. So let's not fool ourselves to think that things are better because you got a couple of people that live in a certain neighborhood where they couldn't live there 20 years ago. They got a certain kind of car. That is meaningless. Institutional racism is real, it's deep, it affects all sectors. So you have to, you know, reach out to your family, your friends, your colleagues, I'm talking about you students, and say, look, you know, I'm not going to tolerate this any longer. It ends with our generation. It ends here with the millennials and Gen Z. And I think if that became the clarion cry,
we maybe can start making noticeable change and not the incremental changes that I've seen over the last 50 years.
Robert, do you mind before I get to that? I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Black Lives Matter movement. I don't want to just glaze over that.
Thank you.
And I want to be more intentional and talk to the young people back there. How you guys doing? All right? Just because you got a mask don't mean you can't move. Everybody.
I know that he's like afraid of something. Hello?
Is this detention that we don't know about?
Tight.
I hope this is not a punishment.
Tight.
So-
Relax.
Good morning.
Relax.
So, I want to talk about that and talk directly to the young people. You know, we need to be more intentional when it comes to what we're doing. Black Lives Matter movement, that's great. People out there marching with us, we're rubbing shoulders, it's great. It is very colorful, and I see a lot of whites out there, that's beautiful. But when I get back to my neighborhood, that same person, or when I'm at a Patriots game, and that same person, or when I'm getting my Travis Scott McDonald's meal, that same person, I want them to have that same energy they had at the Black Lives Matter march. When they was marching with me, and they had their fist up and all that, I don't see all the same energy. You know, I want that all the time. When you're cheering for Cam Newton, I need that. You know, when you're buying your Travis Scott meal and you're lit and all this other stuff, I need that. I need you standing with me in those moments. So that's my cry to the young people out here today. That you know, the young whites for sure. That make sure you're doing that. You're intentional with your efforts. You know, bystander training is one of the things I do. Teaching people how to step up. It's not easy to step up and say, hey, that's wrong. Why are you talking like that about my friend? Why are you making that joke? Why are you acting like that? But you can do it.
I'm glad you brought that. I'm going to go to you, Kasim, though. But how do you reach young people in, how do I say this, less diverse communities?
Coby had said something about a couple months ago. He was like, because he lived in South Providence. He's like, we protest and we go through his streets. I don't live in South Providence. I live in North Kingstown. We are blessed to have, we're fortunate that when we go protest peacefully, and we go home, we leave. Coby's still there. And that had me, I had to pause for a second when he said those words. I'm like, wait a minute, let me make sure I'm doing what I need to do. Because guess what? That's his community, but I'm also part of his community. And so it illustrates more about, remember I told you before about, you gotta take a look at yourself in the mirror? When he calls, I'm one of the first ones there to hop in my car and drive all the way from North Kingstown
All the way.
to South Providence, because it matters. Being active in the community matters, regardless of where I live, because at that point in time, that's what mattered. And to have a united front in our community, My daughter, when she graduated, she's volunteering at Providence, an after-school program. She's like, Dad, I just saw something that just totally kind of changed my perspective. She went to school in North Kingstown, playgrounds, parks, everything. She went to one of the schools, one basketball hoop that was broken. Tennis court ran down, not being maintained. That's community. That's observant. I'm like, Gia, you can make a difference. And so her mission is to, all the things that she was privileged to have growing up, she's trying to instill that in our inner city. To instill that there is hope, that Chairwoman talked about. Being mindful of the past that Brother Vincent talked about. And that's how we make a difference.
What I think I'm hearing is we need to get out of our comfort zones. Anastasia?
Yeah, we are for the moment. Just be certain that this conversation may not have been taking place, conversations like these, had George Floyd not been murdered in front of all of us. Because the struggles that we are discussing today has been going on for decades, generations after generations. It's our reality. And when I talk about our reality, I'm not talking about the black community's reality, all of our reality. It's just that others have not been subjected to it as on a daily basis as we have and continue to be. So it's a situation where step up, step out, and do the right thing. The time has come. We are all at a crossroads of making the change that needs to finally be here. COVID came in. What has that caused us? What has that taught us? There are some great things that came out of this pandemic. Great things. And I'm not going to go through them, but think about it. There's some awful things that came out of it too, but there were lessons for each and every one of us, because that pandemic has touched everybody in this world. Just like George Floyd's death, it touched everybody in this world. Not just Rhode Island, everywhere. And it has lit us up to do something. What that something is going to be, it's not going to be putting Black Lives Matter in your windows or outside on your lawn or hold a conversation, because this is not a moment in history. Understand that. Think about that. This is a new movement in history that we all are part of. And we need to make sure that if you're in it for the right reasons at this particular time, you do the right thing, you do your part. If you're looking to do something, to leave your footprint that's going to be positive and constructive and beneficial for other than yourself, step up, speak out. Just don't put it in your window. I have enough cute curtains that I can put up there and look good. So do something, act, don't react. Be the change that we all know. Once we do that crossroads, we go through it, we're gonna go through it together. And we're gonna make the change for the better for this entire, not only the state of Rhode Island. We don't have to get ugly and tear up and burn up and beat up nothing or no one. We can peacefully make our voices be heard, our changes be made, and hold accountable those individuals in power that's making a decision for each and every one of us accountable. Yes, we can do that. Together we can do that.
I do want to combine two of the questions together and get all of your answers. How do you define racism? How do you define diversity? I think it's important that we define what racism is and what diversity looks like. Jim.
Racism is when you have people of power that say that a group of people of a different skin color are inferior. People in power saying that another group, people that are, let's say, non-white, are inferior just because of their skin color and nothing else. That's racism. Now, diversity is each and every one of us. If there's 100 people in here, we are all part of diversity. Diversity is the phenomenon of being different. If you have 25 people from Pontigansett, they're all 18 years old, and they're all Irish. You know what you have, other than a mess? Diversity.
Hope you're not all Irish.
Diversity. Because even their moms, if you have twins and triplets, would say, they're as different as night and day. That's diversity. Diversity of thought, diversity of ethnicity, diversity of age. Diversity means difference, meaning that we're all in this together. We're all different. Diversity does not mean black people. It does not mean women. It means each and every one of us. So if you're a white male, you're part of diversity as well. So racism, groups of power, or even individuals that don't have power, that just judge people because of the color of their skin. That's not the only racism, but that's the racism we should talk about here. Simply because of the color of their skin, and it's the judgment that's inferior, and it's never superior, and it's done without even knowing the person's name.
Listen.
Marginalization in terms of the racism piece. Deliberately putting forth policies and decision-making based on the sole premise of color. Diversity, the ability to get to an informed decision based on the different demographics and psychological differences that we all have.
Anastasia?
Racism for me is the mistreatment of individuals just because. I'm short, I'm fat, I'm tanned, my eyes are slanted. Diversity is welcoming. Listening the different viewpoints of others and engaging in that. Come on in. What's that about? Diversity. It's a nice, natural feeling to me.
Okay.
Racism, just as I would define bullying, I would say was an imbalance of power. So I just think racism pretty much is when, I like to talk to the kids all the time, the young folks, when you're flexing. You're flexing your muscles, you you have more power than somebody, and you flex it. In which way? It could be, as Brother Williams saying, talking about someone's inability to do something, the way they look, or what have you. To me, that's racism. Diversity is differences, and that's why I like to celebrate diversity all the time, because I think the more we celebrate people's differences, the more we realize that we're alike. So that's what I would say about diversity, because these are just terms that were given to us many years to try to equalize the playing field. As you notice, diversity has kind of transformed into inclusion now, and then equality has transformed into equity. You know what I'm saying? So these words are something that I go by, but only to a certain extent. It's all about action, as we spoke about.
And here's a really good question from one of the students. What are race relations like in Rhode Island?
Oh, God.
I know someone's itching to talk. Uh-oh. You need your pulpit?
Oh, my God. You talk about Rhode Island and Providence plantations. Let me tell you, it's sad. It's disappointing. It is hurtful. It is bitter. It is salty. What else can I say negative about that? It's unfair. It's unjust.
Can you give us some examples? Like,
you have individuals in the state that present themselves very likable, very intelligent, very giving, very interesting. But in reality, my experience, they're the complete opposite. But you would never know that by their presentation of themselves. So I'm sitting here and I want to tell it, but I have to be somewhat careful to a certain degree, because I'm speaking to a room full of youngsters, and I don't want to necessarily taint your mind on these individuals simply because of this fact. And as much as we may be the same, you have the top preference. So you will be treated better than me and mine. So I have to be careful, because your experience may not amount to mine. So I will reserve giving the names and some of the examples that will bring you right to the individuals I'm referring to for that reason.
okay.
Yeah, I was over here itching like Brett Williams over here. I'm jumping off my seat pretty much. So race relations here, I'm 49 years old, and I would say race relations here in Rhode Island has forced me to always take the high road. And the few times I veered off and didn't take the high road, oh, believe me, they let me have it. They let me have it, just like people sitting at this table. As soon as you come out of that comfort zone or something they don't like, or you're gonna be on the front page, or you'll be in the news for a while as this tyrant, as this,
Angry black man?
Angry black man. I can think of, I'm trying to think of the nice ways because we're talking to students, you know. But as what Williams said, I don't want to taint, you know, your future as far as the way you think about fellow leaders or the way you think about black leaders. So what I would say is, you know, the mask is a big thing right here. It was easy for me to wear this mask because I have to go to work every day with a mask on anyway, before COVID, because of the race relations in Rhode Island. You know, we can't bring our true selves to work. We just can't, because if we do, we get crucified for it, we get ridiculed for it, you may even get fired for it.
So what do we do to change this? We're hearing race relations aren't good, and the young people need to hear this. How do we change?
You can't take the high road. You cannot take the high road in many instances. You gotta be humble, yes. But honey, when I let Sinead out, it's because the high road did not work. And sometimes you have to let them have it 24/7 until they get it.
For the vast majority of Rhode Islanders, there's really no race relations. We live in a very segregated state. 90% of people of color live in 5 communities: Woonsocket, Newport, Providence, Central Falls, and Pawtucket. So there's almost no interaction with people of color from the vast majority of white people in this state. Almost none. On a daily basis, there's no friends, there's no family, there's no church, there's no school, there's no relations for the vast majority. So there really isn't any race relations. And when it is, there's an awkwardness because it's like anything else. It's new, it's like different. You approach social media and the regular media and history books and whatever, so you have stereotypes of people, and usually if it's people of color, it's always bad, always negative. And if it's people that are white, they're on the white horse with the white hat, they're the hero, beating down the Indians or whatever. So, you know, you come in with all that baggage. All right, so what we need to do is get to know each other better, at least for a start. And we also need to ask, the white community needs to ask questions. You know that there are problems in the black community, and people are not born inferior, they're not born to be last just because of their color of their skin. There are things that have been done to them. We have to acknowledge that that's the fact and not believe the demagogues that say it's all their fault. No, it's not all their fault, all our fault. Things are done to us, so we gotta accept that. Once we accept that, then we can have the meaningful dialogue that's needed to say, what are we gonna do about it? Because it doesn't help you when people of color have less. You know, there's this whole thing by demagogues that the more they get, the less you'll get. But that's a game to keep them in power and to keep you subjugated, okay? All the way back to slavery, when they saw the black slaves and the white sharecroppers getting together, they said, oh no, we gotta keep them separate. So we'll make the white people the police and the rest of the black people, then we'll keep our power. Keep them at each other. And then the whites will have, the blacks will have crumbs and the whites will have crumbs and a biscuit, okay, as opposed to the steak that we're eating. All right, so we gotta understand what's really going on at the highest levels. So what you need to do is make an intentional move to get to know people of color for who they are for real. Okay, not what you hear in terms of social media, and make a commitment to say, it stops with us, Gen Z, it stops here with us. Baby boomers couldn't do it, Generation X couldn't do it, millennials are trying, but with Gen Z, this is the generation that stops with us, okay? And be intentional with it, and get to know people beyond a superficial level, try to be intentional with it, and only in that case, you're gonna see people as people, and then you're gonna have meaningful change. You won't be in such fear that if he gets something, I'm going to get less. It's not a zero-sum game. You know, the rising tide lifts all boats. That's what it really is. You know, we'll all be better off without the strife, without being at each other, without, you know, all this anger. Your life will be better in terms of the quality of your life, and you will not lose a penny in terms of the exchange. If we're doing better, people of color, you're doing better. That's the free market society. Anybody that says different is a demagogue that's trying to keep you down. They're already keeping us down. They want to keep you down as well. So don't be played, as we would say. You know, that's why you're paying $75,000 a year to go to be a freshman at the school that I went to, when I was only paying $5,000. Okay?
You know, that was many movies ago, right?
But that doesn't affect just black. So that's not affecting just black people. That's affecting you. You gotta pay that 15 times more just to be a freshman in somebody's college in a private university. So how are you benefiting? So collectively, we have to work together to right the wrong that's affecting you as well as us. We are not enemies, we are allies, in theory. We gotta act like that and not be afraid, like our parents and grandparents, and work with each other and get to know each other and understand that if I'm doing better, you're gonna do better. I'm not your enemy. You know, I'm trying to be your friend.
And Kasim, do you think panel discussions like this go a long way in breaking down racial barriers?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a force multiplier because it gives direct interaction with the panelists, more importantly, the audience. We need to hear from the audience. We need to do a better job, and like I said, like Chairwoman Anastasia said, communication, 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 open dialogue. Develop an ability to have an open door policy there. If I have a staff member that has a concerning issue, then it's about a trust. That come to my office, we'll sit down and work it out. And we go from there to set the example. But it starts with the individual. Because if I can't fix myself, how can I go out and be an instrument for change if I have my own epithets that are driving my decision-making process?
Now, I know I'm going a little off script, but can we get some questions from some of the young people out here?
Love that.
Just because we want to hear from you. I have questions from a lot of young people, but do any of you have a question? If you do, just pop right up. No, so meeting?
Just another school day.
Take that first step. That's all you gotta do, just take the first
Stand up,
step.
ask a question.
Come on in, the water's fine.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Absolutely.
I think, as you can see, we're mostly a white school. And we've worked hard, and I think everybody will to attest to it, to teach acceptance and inclusion. That's what it says on our shirt. We have a pledge down in the field house, and we've really worked on it. But I think when it comes to this and racism, I think we first have to sit and listen, but really hear your story. What was, after George Floyd was killed, the mayor of Atlanta, what's her name? I can't remember right now.
Lance Bottoms.
That's Keisha,
Yeah.
that's
Right.
Bottoms.
So I saw her on one of the news stations, and she was talking about what she's been through. But she talked about teaching her son, when you get pulled over by a policeman, where you place your hands, what you say, how you, and I listened to her and probably heard it for the first time, really heard it. I have 3 sons, and I never had, yes, we taught, you be respectful, all that kind of stuff, but I never said to my sons, this hand goes here, this hand goes here, you never make a quick, motion, and so and for me, and how I feel, it changed that day, because for the first time, maybe I heard, as a mom, I empathized, oh my God, I can't imagine my kid getting pulled over just because of the color of his skin, not for any other reason.
I have a colleague that was going, he just turned 18, and he was getting ready to get his he was eligible to get his driver's license. And his mom said, why? Now it's time, he's like, Mom, I don't want to get his driver's license. He's like, why? Because I'm fearful that something's going to happen to me on the road driving. And as a mother, hearing it from a son, that his life is just beginning essentially, and as you know, those that have driver's license, that's a major, major event in a person's life.
Mm-hmm.
But here he is just starting out, and he's already had that preconceived notion that, hey, if I get a driver's license, something bad could happen to me on the road by someone else. And he's making a conscious effort to not to pursue something. And that's a parent. That's like ground, it doesn't get more ground zero than that. But it shows you the power of parenting and how do we, the burdens of our parents now are a lot more than ever, and especially those of black descent.
Well, it's called The Talk, so let me let you know what that was called. Lance Bottom, she didn't say anything original to the black community. to let you know that. We all have that talk. And I can say this to this community, and I'll say it to you young folks for sure. The talk, when you hear the talk, you're talking sex, probably drugs. Well, there's a third one when you're a person of color. It's about law enforcement, okay? Driving up here on 101, I was like this. And I work with the state police. And I'm 49, all right? And this is real. Driving up here, I had to make a conscious effort to make sure I was 10 and 2. Every day, it's never stopped since I had that talk, all right? My daughter's 11. I get her ready, 5 years already early. Listen to me. This is what you need to do. She's looking at me like, you guys looking at me like, what are you talking about that? I just start getting it ingrained in her mind now. My other daughter's 18 now. She has a license. She's had to talk 20 times. And my son that's 23, that has been through police brutality, even though he's had to talk, it saved his life because he had to talk. He was able to be silent when he was being accosted, and when he was being yelled at, and when he was being told that they was going to do this and that to him, he was silent. And I was so happy that I had to talk, because he might not be here today. So that's a talk that, and you can ask any of your friends of color if their family has had to talk with them, and I can guarantee you 99% of them will say, oh yeah, we've had that talk already.
That brings us to police. One of the students wants to know, do you believe police are implicitly biased against black people?
No doubt. If there are some very good police officers, law enforcement officers, honorable men, unfortunately, the bad ones make them look just as bad. Okay? And I would like to share a story. And as much as we have the talk with our children on a daily basis almost, I witnessed my son walking home just a block away, and I was looking out the window, and a police officer in his cruiser turned the corner and followed slowly behind him. He had on basketball short and a t-shirt, and I watched it till it came right to the corner of the house, and he was talking to him through the window to the point where he stopped the vehicle and he stopped my son and told him he looked like someone they were looking for. He fit the profile. Imagine. I'm petrified, what's going on? I run out the house. But as I ran out the house, I thought quickly, what's going on? What could happen? I ran back in and got my badge. And that saved my son. My badge. Because they were about to, that officer was about to take my son because he claimed he fit the profile. The talk is one thing and beneficial when we talk to our children and our family about it. But the police, they have had their talk, and it's entirely the opposite of what we are telling our children and our families. Some of them have joined the force in order to be what they are: bad cops, bad cowboys, jump out boys. That's why, not to serve and protect, but to carry out that evil act that they were bred as a child, that hate, because they were taught it from the beginning. As Kareem said, it starts from home. That behavior was started from home. That hate was planted as a youngster. And they have a tool to be able to carry those behavior out. And that's that uniform, the men in blue.
What do you do?
Sadly, it's deeper than that. It's it's deeper than a couple of bad apples. It's not about a couple of bad apples, and that's true. There are bad apples in the group, in the bunch. But it's systemic, okay? More often than not, in every police department, if it's a white community, they're there to protect and serve, and if it's a community of colors, to occupy and harass. As a matter of policy, and as a matter of good police work, you have a community of color, the best way to police that community is to occupy and harass. It's a philosophy that permeates every member of that police department, white and non-white. That's the way it is. And so it's systemic. I mean, you can get rid of all the bad apples in the world, and you're still going to have the same problems until you change the mindset of how people look at communities in general. And we have statistics, okay? In Rhode Island, and let's use marijuana as an example, okay? Blacks and whites use marijuana roughly the same. Maybe whites use it slightly more, okay, at all ages. But yet blacks, I think it was 3 years ago, through an ACLU study, were arrested 2.5 times more, okay? Now, you don't have to be a graduate student in statistics to understand that that's way beyond any standard deviation. That's targeting. Targeting. So we have hard evidence of, people being stopped in terms of for nothing. We have statistics that show that there are indeed implicit bias throughout the entire department. Throughout the entire department, not just with the bad apples. We have to make sure that people do not become police officers that should never be there in the first place because of their hatred or bias in terms of people of color, and then they just want to be able to be legally in a situation where they can beat up and shoot people where they couldn't do it as a normal citizen, which is the intent of some people that go into law enforcement. They can play out their aggressions against people they don't like, which in this country usually is people of color. So that's a problem, but it's so much worse than that. That minimizes the problem. It's systemic in terms of how we look at our communities. As long as we look at communities of color as bad, we got to occupy and harass everybody's bad. Be they a so-called drug dealer or a PhD teacher, bad because of the color of their skin. So we got to look at them differently. We got to follow around stores, just because then we're never going to change the situation. Yes, it's good to get rid of bad apples, but if we think we've done our job just by doing that, we're mistaken. We're kidding ourselves. We have to look at this thing through the systemic lens and make sure that people from the highest levels, the chiefs, the commissioners, or whatever, understand you are not policing communities the same. Even in Providence, you're policing Mount Pleasant different than you're policing South Providence. It's different. There should be one standard for the entire police department, and you got to look at your evidence and you got to act on it as opposed to brushing it under the rug, like you've been doing for decades. And that's only then when things change.
I have a question. How much more time do we have? Okay. Okay. So what can be? We talk about defunding the police. It's not exactly defunding the police, and the students want to know what that would look like.
Well, I mean, defunding the police is a funny term because to some people it does mean defunding the police. Defunding to me means $0 to police, no police. That's what it means to me. That's why that word is problematic. To other people, it means divest and invest. You look at dollars that the police don't need in terms of maybe body armor and mace and whatever, and you put it into helping hire mental professionals that can help, or social workers or whatever. So you have that philosophy, and that's pretty much what I think the majority of people are. And I'm even deeper than that. The police budget, I think in most police departments, the budget's not enough to really do the job well. You got to look at all budgets. Not just look at the police budget, let's look at every budget. And try to make sure that it meets the challenges of public safety in 2020.
Anastasia, you're itching.
First and foremost, the police department, and I'm speaking for Providence, gets a lot of money. Lots of money. One of the things that baffles me, they have a budget for getting new weapons just about every year. Hello, a budget for that? How often are you using the gun that's issued to you? The guns. And what do you do with the ones that you had? You will have to get the latest new model to do what? Who are you planning on shooting? Those are dollars that could be redirected in places that it's needed. And it's not. We have to get the best, the fastest, and the quickest. For who? To shoot one of me? Hello, baby. No.
What can the legislature do about that?
You know,
I know you're
you know, when it comes to trying to remove and consolidate and redirect, what happens? The good old white boys, and I mean that respectfully, come in and say it ain't gonna happen, just like Leopold. It's wrong. It's curtailed, it's fixed to satisfy, to protect, to enhance you all, and to harm us. What is the legislature going to do? I'm going to continue to do what I've been doing, and that's advocating for truth and justice. And I hope that my colleagues will finally hear, not just listen, not become and continue to be window dressing, and make the change. There is a lot of money, lots of money, and there's too many shell entities for monies being put at. Do you need this? No. Do we need to get new revolvers for officers every year? Absolutely not. How many times have you shot the ones you have? What happens to the ones that you're giving up? There is, honey, I can make $1 holler and a buffalo run off of a nickel. Let me go into their financial books and see if I don't fix that. There is more than enough money in the police departments right now. If we sat down and was honest about it, you would see how much money we could redirect to social programs, health issues, health problems, homelessness, schools. There's a lot of do-re-mi. We just need individuals that are courageous enough to say enough is enough, because we, the taxpayers, are paying for that.
And Coby, you're
So,
not.
Barbara, yeah, because I don't think I've ever agreed with Rep. Williams so much in my life. She's definitely on point today for sure. Restructure is the word. I think defund was way more sexier than restructure the police. Can you imagine people walking through the city?
Right.
Restructure the police, it just don't sound.
It doesn't sound sexy.
Don't sound cool. Restructure the police, and I'd have to disagree with Jim on this, and not that this is that type of thing, but they do have enough money. They just don't, they got money to do things that they shouldn't be doing. These guys graduated from high school, and no offense, graduated from high school and they're social workers, psychologists, working with the homeless. They don't know how to do that. They don't know how to do those things. They're being paid to do those things. All that extra money is going towards that, let alone the weapons and so on and so forth. We want to go there, but all these other things that they're being paid to do, they shouldn't be paid to do. Pay it on the other end. Give it to the agencies that do that. Give it to the domestic violence places. Give it to the programs that work with kids. The Providence recreation centers, have you seen the budget variance between the recreation center and the police? It's like this. I think there's 11 recreation centers, and they're all, it's a gym. I don't know if you guys plan against it, have ever been there. It's terrible. It's a gym and like an office. That's it, basketball. No tennis courts, no volleyball, no, some of them have swimming pools. That's it, that's horrible. But the police, on the other hand, shiny new cars, new guns, things like that. It's just not fair, actually. It's just not fair, it's not equitable. So when we say defund the police, I think most people are thinking about restructuring. Put the money where it needs to be. Put the money where it needs to be. Yeah, I mean, I can go on for days with that, but I'd love, to hear from the young folks. We got about 15 minutes left.
I just want to say, I do agree.
Yeah.
We have to take money that the police should not have and put it in other areas. But what I'm saying is that the problem is so bad that you could take the entire police budget and spend it in other areas, and our situation is so dire, then that wouldn't be enough. Providence, for example, has the worst public school system in the country. So you could take the entire police budget and put it in the Providence public schools and wouldn't even move the dial beyond a fraction. So what I'm saying is that let's do it an all-court press. Let's take money from every city budget to put it where it should be. Not just the police budget, which it should be first, but every budget. I'm just saying to think that we're going to move money from the police and we're going to do this and things are going to be great in Providence or wherever, that's a fantasy.
That's like saying all lives matter to me. We're talking about Black Lives Matter on this or something, so we're saying let's talk about all the...
No, I'm saying
just the police right now.
I'm saying we need much more money.
That's
We
it.
need much more money.
All right, and we're not disagreeing with that.
That's right, it's no disagreement. I'm just saying it's...
Can I share something another thing, please? Because he wound me up. How many of you, by a show of hands, know about black inventions and inventors? Right on, yes, nice. So let me share some of the things. How many of you enjoyed the air conditioning this summer?
Oh, I know I did.
Hello. I know I did. Did you all know that the air conditioning was invented by a black man? It was. And we enjoyed it, but we didn't all know that, right? How about the bicycle frame? Because, you know, summertime, we're on that, right? That too. How about the cable TV, the bookings, all that, different 19,000 channels? That too. How about the doorknob that we utilize to come in and out? That too. How about the fire extinguisher that I was looking for in this room and I didn't see one?
Uh-oh.
Hello, that too. How about the hairbrush that I see some of these beautiful ladies in here with the nice waves in their hair? That hairbrush was invented by another black person. Hello. How about the lawnmower? Because you had your jobs, you know, you had to make sure that you kept your lawn. That was one of your responsibility, your chores this summer, to keep the lawn nice and manicured, nice, lovely, lovely. That lawnmower was also invented by a black person. The sprinkler, the lawn sprinkler, was too. The mailbox, that your mailman probably comes in their little trucks to deliver. Ours come through our doors or something like that. That was invented by a black man. The mop that we had to kind of pull out this morning to mop the kitchen floor, hello, that was invented by a black person. And there's a whole bunch of other things that we use on a daily basis, like the refrigerator. COVID-19 brought me, look, I was opening up that refrigerator every hour on the half hour I was eating something, being on lockdown with COVID-19. So that refrigerator was also invented by a black person, okay? There are many, 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 many more items, inventions that are utilized by everybody in this room that were invented by a black person, and you didn't know. The traffic light that I was trying to make sure I didn't get none when I was coming up here, the yellow and the red, I was zooming. I was not getting, trust me. I had comment in there, I was like,
Thinking about it, going back, all right.
is that the man? But I was, the traffic light, invented by a black man. There are, on a daily basis, we utilize things, a black person. But we are not being taught about it. This is American history. Look it up. This device, you don't have to go to the library. I enjoy going to the library, but here it is. You can have a series. You don't even have to question. You can talk to her and say, hello, can you give me that answer? Who did this? Who? We have everything, every accommodation at our fingertips to find out the truth. And I ask you, I started this book, this brochure, 5 years ago with inventions and inventors and the years when they were and who they are. There is many, many more. Please get familiar with them and please pass it on. This is a listening conversation, a two-way street for all of us, because many in this room had no clue of touching that doorbell, that doorknob, opening up that refrigerator, using that brush, none of that. It was just something that was there. Well, we did that. We did a lot, and we continue to do a lot. But we're not being recognized. We're not being respected. And we're not being welcomed. So I say, it doesn't take much. And I ask you, and I hope that Mr. Stanley would invite every student in this school to spend some time in the schools in our cities and towns. It would be ideal if you came for 30 days and do the reverse with our students to come here. Get that flavor, get that communication, get it started, and see it and feel it, and so that you can speak it. Because you're not going to know, and sometimes you're not even going to remember, if in fact you just have us as guests to come and have another conversation. Come in it, be part of it, feel it, talk about it, and see what we go through, what we have, and what you have, what you would consider a norm. All the equipment that you need in order to understand and deliver and receive that lesson for the day. And you come into our classrooms with our students that don't have the minimal basics that you all are used to on a daily basis in your classroom. That is a norm for you. Your worst school would be our greatest or best school in our city. So please, Mr. Stanley, please, Mr. Teachers, think about that. Let's see if we can not be like this, but be like this with each other moving forward.
There's a question over here.
Hearing what everybody's saying, I think that, especially what you said about being a segregated state, I think we all really feel that. And what, I think it was Coby who mentioned, like, you do bystander training, and I think, like, as part of, like, a member of this community, and I actually don't live far from you, I live in East Greenwich, and really just trying to understand, like, we're hearing, like, we should put in the work, right? And I think a lot of times we're like, okay, well, how do we get started, and how do we integrate ourselves? And I think that's a burning question that a lot of us have. And I think as somebody who works in a predominantly white community and lives in a predominantly white community, and I am white myself, things like the talk, I don't think white people really knew about the talk until Angie Thomas published her book, The Hate You Give, and until we started seeing it on Black-ish. I think that TV show highlighted it. And then when we're really hearing about it in the news, but it, like you said, I agree, it's casually mentioned. So waking up and having that awareness, I think it's easy for us to tell students to be like, hey, wake up and have awareness. So the how is really important, and I think here at Pontiac we are trying to include Black voices and Black narratives in the book we read, and trying to tell students, hey, follow, people of color on Instagram and on social media, so your feed isn't completely whitewashed themselves. And I think your suggestion to maybe volunteer in different communities so that we're not such a segregated state is a really specific, helpful thing to tell kids in our community. And I didn't know if you had any other suggestions of, like, how to do the work. Like, I love your suggestion about, like, being aware of Black inventors and contributions that were made to the whole world. But I think that's where many of our students stand, is like, they feel it and they're seeing it, but specifically, how can kids get out there and make change?
I think real quick, look at Pontiac, what you're already doing. Reach across America. You have taken up a cause for our fallen men and women, and now you lead this state with that mission. Build upon that. Go into the incentives. Communicate with the superintendents, communicate with other superintendents. To establish that dialogue.
and look at the exchange program, which is a phenomenal idea.
Love that.
Love it.
I think being intentional when you're addressing microaggressions, micro-assaults, micro-invalidations, making sure the students know the difference between that. Because all the little things that happen in the halls, like, oh, what are you doing here? Or, oh, wow, how did you get that? Or, all those little things, when they're not addressed, they progress. And then they turn into marches and legal battles and things like that. So I think the students, you can start with that. When you hear your friends saying little, slide things or little slip remarks about people of color, things like that, I think checking them on that at the moment is what you do. And you may not be brave enough at this point to do that right away. You can do it later. You can do it through an email. You can do it through a text message. You can do it anyway, like, hey, man, what you said earlier, to John, man, that wasn't cool. He's Native. You know what I'm saying? What you said to, Joanne, her dad's black. You know what I mean? Things like that. They really do matter. If you continue to let it go by and you just keep going through, what's going to happen is you're going to get to college and you're going to have what you call a culture shock. And you're not going to know what to do. And you're going to lose a lot of friends. And you're going to be in a lot of situations like, hey, man, I'm from Rhode Island, 39 cities and towns. There's a lot of blacks and Spanish or whatever. But if you never really immersed yourself in it and went through it, you're not going to know how to act when you get to college, because it is a very diverse community in most colleges, right? So just start to be intentional and do the work. You can do it. I mean, I don't care if you're 15 or 55. It's not too late as well. Thank you for what you do. It's not too late. And as far as the inventions that Anastasia was talking about, I want to be the first to say I didn't know half of those neither. So I want you to think all black people know all that. And the reason why we don't know all that is because our schools don't teach us all that. And that makes me go, all the time. I had to teach my daughters that stuff. I have to teach, my daughter could go to Brown University, Harvard, anywhere she wants to go. You know where she wants to go? To an HBCU. Those are historically black colleges. And as a black man, I should be super proud of that. But I know when she graduates from one, it's going to be a little different than if she graduated from Harvard or Brown or so on and so forth. So that's a conversation in my house right now. That's the things, these are the crossroads we talked about that we have to go through every day that are not the norm for you. They're the norm for us.
By the way, the first black millionaire was a woman, Madam C.J. Walker,
Madam C.J.
who made hair products. I just want to throw that one
I know
out.
that.
First self-made woman, period.
Oh, yeah.
Not black, just period.
Well, exactly. But the first, she's noted as the first black millionaire,
Right.
and it was a woman.
That woman, you
Thank
got
you.
a lot of
Hello,
power.
right?
Hello.
But that's what I was talking, what Coby was just saying is just between I am not a racist and being anti-racist. Okay, so that, I think, when you're being more intentional, is, nobody wants to admit that they're a racist. And there are people that are not a racist per se. But if you're not doing things intentionally to be anti-racist, then that's when there's going to be a problem for you now and later. So please, do that. And those inventors or whatever, there's a reason why we don't know about that in any community. It's intentional, because as long as we're perceived to be the other, not worthy, never have done anything, then it makes it harder for people to unify. But if you knew that we did all those things and that we have pride in ourselves because of what we did, and you have pride in us because we're doing as much as anybody else, then there are people that don't want that. So, it's not just in Rhode Island schools, it's in most schools. It's not the Boston schools for sure. So that's intentional. They don't want you to know anything positive about people of color. That is intentional, okay? To keep you thinking that we are less than or the other. If they were to have all those things in books, your whole attitude towards us, from students to police, would be different, and they don't want that. There are people that intentionally do not want that. So be mindful. Be mindful.
Let's start wrapping it up. I want final words from each of you, and we'll just start over here and just we'll start with Coby. Some final words to our students.
So once again, to the students, thank you for being here. I know, it's been many moons since I've been in the high school atmosphere, but I do visit high schools very often. I talk to students all the time. I love to go to rooms like yourselves, maskless though, and have a conversation and dialogue about these subjects. That's how I do my part. I keep the conversation going. This is not a one-off. You can go on my social media and talk to me. You can email, what have you, from Mr. Stanley. Just like he reaches out to me, you guys can reach out to me as well. It's actually a safe way to communicate because it's all on record. I know a lot of times with parents, they don't want you communicating with adults, but it can all be on record. So with that said, be intentional. Do something today to make a change. All right? Do something today. Make a statement. Stand up. Don't just, you don't be the stereotypical person that just thinks, as Jim was just saying, we're held to a lower quality because it's not out there. That's why you just think basketball players and rap, that's it. I know for a fact, everywhere I go to elementary schools and kids, oh, your name's Coby? Oh, Coby, that's the first thing they do. It doesn't matter if I have a suit on, they think I'm a basketball player. And it's not just because of the name, it has a lot to do with the psyche of a tall black man, he must play basketball. Well, that couldn't be further from the truth. So with that said, you have to make sure you take everybody for who they are, get to know folks, as the panel said, and once again, thank you all for your attention and thanks for having us.
I want to say thank you as well for Mr. Stanley and all of the staff that put this together. I really and truly appreciate it. I want to thank every student that is here present, that listened, and with the hopes that you've heard our words that we presented here today. It was a listening conversation, and I hope that you will have many takeaways that you not only will be discussing amongst each other, but outside of the school building, maybe even with your families and your friends outside in your neighborhood. Because it's an important step that we all have to take and should take. Because it's a new day. It is your world. I am happy to be in it and learning your direction, being part of your journey. We have come halfway at least in ours. And we learned from our forefathers, our parents and grandparents and so forth, and friends. Times have changed. Things have gotten better, but it hasn't gotten to the point that it needs to be. You all hold that opportunity in your hands to do that, to make that change. For us to see before we're out of here. So while you think about your peanut butter, it wasn't Peter Pan or Jiffy that made it. Remember, these inventions and contributions were done by American individuals that look like us. But we all benefited, all benefit from it. It wasn't done in a selfish way. It was done so that we as society could move forward. Life could be easier, things could be easier and better. There's still a lot of more inventions to come forward. And you all are the inventors, alongside, all together with us. Like I said, being like this, you can slip. Being like this, we're in it together. So just don't display. Be part of and act it. And that's what I say. That's what I ask. And I am just delighted to see that you're here. So talk to your teachers. Maybe they could fit it in where when things get back to as normal as possible, that you will come into our schools and see our reality. And you can bring some solutions, some ideas to our side, as well as we can do the same. Just know that it's been more than a decade. We requested the legislature made a law where Black history was supposed to be the curriculum in every school. To date, they have not acted on it. So maybe you all can demand it. Not ask for it, demand it, because you're deserving of it. Thank you for having us, me, and Shanae here today with you.
Good morning. How does one navigate life's journey? It's not going to be easy. Some of us, by the color of skin, it is easier. some of us by the color of our skin, it's exponentially hard to get out of that. We live, as I mentioned earlier, we live in a world that more diverse, we are more diverse than ever. But what I'd ask you, to offer you to do is say, hey, take a look at yourself. What are you doing to be an instrument for change? To embrace diversity? One of the measures is that along that journey, you're going to come across someone that has a different demographic than you, or a different philosophical difference than you. That's okay, because that person's view, that person's demographic is no better, no worse than yours. So once we start to come to that realization, the true essence of work can begin, and we will continue to move down that path of life together. Thank you.
Well, first and foremost, yeah, thank you all for being here, and thank you for the organizers. It's been a privilege and an honor to be here. I think we need to do more of these, even at Pontigansett, but definitely at other predominantly white schools. I think it's helpful. I would have wanted to have more of a dialogue with the students, but that's okay because this is the beginning. But understand that where we are in history in this country is that there's a browning of America, okay? And that's why we're at a critical part now where people are now not asking, but they're demanding, because now we have seats in Congress and we have other people in other positions, and that's what happens when you have diversity in the country. You know, when I was growing up, the country was pretty much 90% white, 95% white, and you know, Leave It to Beaver, and that was it. Now it's 30% of color. Students of color in the public schools in Rhode Island is between 45 to 50% of the public school students in Rhode Island right now are of color. The majority of kids 5 years old and younger in Rhode Island today are of color, the majority. So we have to get it right, okay, because this world is different than the other world that we've left. So what I would suggest, I'm not going to be a one-off. I'm going to be accessible to all. I'm thinking here, you know, the NAACP, the oldest and the largest civil rights organization, we established in Providence in 1913. We have high school chapters. We have one in Providence, EQ Academy. We have another one in New England in East Boston High School. I'm not going to make any commitments, but, you know, we're looking for other high schools to maybe form a chapter. We need 25 people to sign up. That might be something we might need to do. And actually, when it comes to NAACP nationally, I'm not too sure how many predominantly white high school chapters we have, if any, in the country. So it's something I need to research. But I think we've got to begin somewhere. So why not here at Pontigansett? I mean, I'm not making any commitments, but I'm thinking that there's some opportunities here that maybe I don't even see clearly. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. I think that this is good. You're better off today than you were yesterday by this discussion, and you'll be better off tomorrow if you just, you know, take it in and make sure you understand that, you know, you're all where you are because of how the country has been up to this point. You had no choice, you know, popular culture, education, the lack of in terms of certain topics, and the stereotyping, the incessant stereotyping of the other. You know, you'd have to be in a bubble not to be affected by that. We all have implicit biases, including me, including us, because of the way we have come up in this country. But we're going to change and turn the page. And it begins, hopefully, to really change with Gen Z. So let this be the generation that changes it all, Gen Z. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Coby Dennis, Representative Anastasia Williams, Kasim Yarn, and Jim Vincent, and I'd like to thank all of you here and the entire student body. Let today be the beginning of change. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.